The great city of Damascus. The jewel of Syria, the oldest capital in the world. Great civilizations such as the Egyptians, the Hittites, the Greeks and the Romans have all fought for centuries for the possession of this glistering metropolis. In the year 636, it was now the time for the Islamic Caliphate to claim glory. The Muslims' army stood before the fortified walls of the city with its 6 gates and several guard towers. The Roman garrison of the city was stationed along the entire length of the fortifications to prevent any attempt to break in. The Muslims had no siege weapons with them, so the only thing that they could do was to establish a blockade around the city and cut it off from any supplies. It became a game of patience. Can the Muslim put enough pressure in time to force the Romans to surrender before the Romans' reinforcements arrive? This was the only question burning in the heart of every Muslim soldier present in the siege of Damascus in August of 636. After the Battle of Ajnadin, the Muslims regrouped and rested for a few days. Once that was done, Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, decided to continue the mission of the Rashidun Caliphate to Damascus. As a big part of the Roman forces in that region were sent to Ajnadain to fight the Muslims, Damascus at that point did not have a lot of soldiers and supplies to defend itself against long siege. So the Muslims thought this would be the high time to claim the most prized possession in Syria. There were around 12,000 Roman soldiers stationed in Damascus. The governor of Damascus planned to delay the Muslim advancement as much as possible so that Roman battalions from other parts of Syria could come to help the defense of Damascus. As soon as the Battle of Ajnadin was over, Heraclius arranged his army to defend the important cities of the region including Damascus by reorganizing his military strengths. And the Muslims had to conquer Damascus before the plan of Heraclius was put into action. So it was a race of time. To delay the Muslims, the governor of Damascus sent a battalion of Roman soldiers to establish a barricade at a place called Marja Safar, around 20 kilometers from Damascus. Once the Muslims met the Romans, they sent their champions forward to fight duels. For several hours the duels were fought and most of the Muslim warriors defeated their counterparts. Then the general attack was launched by the Muslims. As the Romans fought from a defensive position, they could hold the Muslim charge for several hours. But at one point during the fight the Muslims overwhelmed the Roman defense line and the Roman had to retreat towards Damascus. After this encounter the Muslim army deployed several groups in the region to surround and isolate Damascus and cut off its supply lines. With these arrangements, the siege of Damascus came into effect. The Muslim army divided into 5 groups under different commanders to keep the gates of the city under observation and prevent any attempts by the Romans to breach the blockade. The siege went on for almost 3 weeks without any large confrontation between the two armies. Then the Muslims got news that a Roman contingent of 12,000 soldiers were coming from Emesa to help the Romans inside Damascus. It is only a few days' distance between these two cities. If this army reaches the outskirts of Damascus, then the Muslim soldiers would be trapped between two Roman armies. So Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, had to react quickly to this new development of events. Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, quickly organized 5,000 horsemen and ordered them to march towards Emesa. Their order was to stop the advancing Roman army on their way at any cost. The two armies confronted each other at a place known as the Pass of the Eagle. The Muslims engaged in a brutal fight with the Romans and bravely resisted rounds of charge by the Roman soldiers. However, the numbers of the Roman soldiers were simply too big for the Muslims to sustain. After fighting for several days the Muslims started to get exhausted and their defense was on the verge of collapse. Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, was constantly getting updates of this conflict. He soon realized that the troops that he sent earlier would not be strong enough to completely stop the enemy. The situation became tricky for the Muslims. If they send more soldiers to help the fighting Muslims, then the Roman soldiers inside Damascus can launch a counterattack on the Muslim camp and defeat them. Then again, if the Muslim fails to stop the Romans at the Pass of the Eagle, then the Muslims' camp would become vulnerable to attacks from the back. There was no easy way out from this situation. So Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, decided to be bold and resolute in his action to take the situation under control. During the night he gathered 4,000 horsemen and rode as fast to the Pass of the Eagle as possible. Once they reached there they spared no time, combined the two Muslim forces and launched a fierce attack on the enemy at dawn. The Roman forces found themselves overwhelmed by Muslim ferocity before they could understand the actual situation. This confusion led to panic and the Roman soldiers lost their morale. The Muslim warriors could finally break through the Roman lines and force the enemy to retreat. But this time the Muslims did not chase the opponents. Rather they turned around and returned to Damascus as quickly as they could with all of the remaining forces. This happened so quickly that the Romans inside the walls of Damascus could not realize on time that a big part of the Muslim soldiers left the camp, defeated the advancing Roman forces and returned to continue the siege all within a day. It was already too late for them to take any advantage of the situation. They realized that their initial plan had failed, they were out of options and no help would arrive on time. But still they decided to launch one final attack to push the Muslim away. So the more or less uneventful siege of Damascus now turned into a fight for survival. Join us next time as we explore the following events during the conquest of Damascus in detail and discuss the setting of Battle of Yarmouk, inshallah.